I'm Comet the Duck. Welcome to video 9, part A. It's called The Mistake, when I don't know how to be me. Before this story started, I thought I was a good person. Not perfect, but dependable, thoughtful, and careful. Sure, I made small mistakes, but I avoided the bigger ones, the kind that would have shaken my inner sense of right and wrong. I felt good about myself. Then a friend asked me to do something, and I promised I would. It was the kind of thing that people trust you will do because everyone knows it's important. It wasn't complicated, and I was looking forward to doing it. And then a few days later, everything changed in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, I became aware that time had passed. I had not done what I promised. It was simple and terrible. I forgot. This was a huge mistake. It mattered. It was my responsibility to remember, but I didn't. For 2 entire days I forgot. And that was the kind of mistake that had my inner sense of right and wrong screaming. I was horrified. It felt like my world was broken. I couldn't rewind time. It was too late. I didn't know what to do because I couldn't undo the mistake. The moment I realized what I'd done, in a near panic, I went straight to the people hurt by my actions. They hadn't even noticed. I could have hidden the truth, but I didn't. I told them of my forgetfulness and of my mistake. I was determined to tell the truth, even if it cost me the friendship. To me, that was basic. Be truthful, acknowledge the mistake, and see if there's anything that can be done to fix it. They heard me out, and they chose to be gracious. They said, well, nothing serious happened, and they forgave me. That was very kind of them. And yet, their forgiveness didn't change the fact that I forgot, nor the reality that something terrible could have happened. And so, I couldn't let it go. I knew what had been on the line. Forgetting had been something very serious. It was my responsibility, and I dropped the ball. I began spiraling down. I didn't know what to do with a huge mistake that I couldn't undo. I realized that I didn't know how to live as me who made a big mistake. I don't mean that I wanted to stop living. I mean that suddenly my entire identity changed. I knew how to live as me who's a good person. I didn't have a clue about how to live as me who made a big mistake. I talked with God. I apologized to Him, and God gave me His forgiveness. That was very meaningful, very gracious, very kind. And yet even God's forgiveness didn't change the fact that I was me who made a big mistake. I didn't know how to be that person. So I didn't know how to move on with my life. That night, I had a dream. It was odd and unsettling. I was just standing somewhere, a different planet, a different dimension, I don't know. There were colors and shapes, but it was so different from everything that I've ever known. I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. I didn't even understand what was an object, what was the background. I couldn't figure out where the edges of shapes were located. I didn't even know what colors meant. I could see, but I couldn't understand even the most basic parts of what I was seeing. I stood there frozen. It wasn't that I was unable to move. I had no reference point. I didn't know which way to move. I searched for my path with God, and I couldn't see it. I couldn't tell if it was there or not. I couldn't find it because I had no idea what a path looked like in this new place. It could have been right in front of me and I wouldn't have known. When I woke up in the morning, the vivid images of this dream were not a comfortable memory, but I was sure the dream was connected to my mistake. I was determined to face my mistake, and so I also chose to face this odd dream. I trusted that in His own time, God would come and help me figure out what I was supposed to do next. As I stood there facing my mistake, I looked at my past. This wasn't my first mistake. How had I handled mistakes before? First, do the basics, apologize, and see if there's an easy way to fix the mistake. Okay, I had done that. If that wasn't enough, I could hear an imagined voice saying, "Sweep it under the rug." I could remember using this rule and seeing others use it too. There were many variations like, "Pretend it never happened," or "Pretend that it really didn't matter." The goal was to move on and let the mistake fade away. This mistake could easily have been allowed to fade away, especially since I had been forgiven. But now, I'm walking with God. To ignore this mistake would be a lie, and I wasn't willing to lie to Him or to myself in His presence. So I chose to face my mistake. And because I was facing it, I had to face something else. The knowledge that I had used sweep it under the rug many times in my life. That was uncomfortable, but I faced that too. I could see now, hiding a mistake weakened my connection to my inner sense of right and wrong. It dulled my awareness of God's voice in my heart. And I didn't want that. I wasn't going to sweep this mistake under any rug. And then another voice came out of my past offering a second option. You made a mistake? Then feel guilty. And if nothing can undo your mistake, then feel guilty forever. And then the voice added a threat hidden in the logic. If you stop feeling guilty, it means you no longer think it was a mistake. Because I was human and couldn't hold guilt forever, this approach would separate me piece by piece from God's voice in my heart. And I had used the second rule before, but now I chose to reject it. I looked for a third option. Surely there was a better way. How could I move on after a mistake, one that mattered, without lying and without distancing myself from God? And that's when I made a startling discovery. I didn't have a third option. A whole lifetime of mistakes? And only two ways of handling them? Both unhealthy? Both pulling me away from God? Wow, I had a huge problem on my hands. I needed a new approach, one that would draw me closer to Him and closer to His voice in my heart. I faced the question honestly. How can I move forward if I've done something that's not just a small mistake, but a wrong that shakes the deepest part of my sense of right and wrong? I asked for God's help. There was no immediate answer. So I did what I could. I reflected and analyzed. I looked for a way to move forward while still listening for God's guidance. How did people in the Bible deal with mistakes? I thought back to the start, so my thoughts landed on Adam and Eve. Eve ate the forbidden fruit. And I've heard people blame her for a lot of the world's suffering. But was it right to blame her? What was the context of her mistake? Her mistake didn't happen out of the blue. Something about the whole setup didn't make sense to me. Something most people don't look at. God made man, Adam and Eve, in his image. In his image. Then he put them in a garden and he made just one rule: don't eat those fruits. And what happened next? Both Adam and Eve promptly broke the rule. Both made a mistake. 100% of the humans God had just finished creating made a mistake? That was stark. God made them, and then they made a mistake. I try to make sense of that. My mind went to a car assembly plant. Humans like to build cars. And then they roll off the assembly line, people add oil and gas, and then the car starts. In fact, 96% of the cars do exactly what they were designed to do. Sure, there's the occasional glitchy one, but for the most part, the vast majority of cars that roll off the assembly line work just fine. God made humans. Even though he only made two, I'm still going to call that God's assembly line. God is far greater than humans, so his results have to be far better than ours. Anything coming off of God's assembly line would work 100% of the time. My mind tried to wrap itself around what was right in front of me, because I was seeing that 100% of God's humans, when they came off of God's assembly line, made a mistake. God is a perfect creator. Perfect creators don't accidentally build defective designs. My mind reached for the conclusion. When Adam and Eve went out and made a mistake, they must have been functioning within God's design parameters. The capacity to make mistakes appears to be part of God's design. And Adam and Eve put that capacity to use. Wow. I don't understand why mistakes are part of God's plan. But the situation is clear. They are part of his plan. Something warmed inside of me at that thought. Yes, I did a wrong, and that still felt very bad. But making that mistake did not put me outside of God's design parameters. That was very good to know. I looked down at my hand. My skin is self-repairing. God doesn't want me to get scratched on thorns. But if it happens, when it happens, God doesn't say, "You made a mistake in caring for your skin. You have a scratch, so I'm going to throw you out." Of course not. God says, "I knew your skin would get scratched. It's okay. I made you with self-repairing skin." Getting scratched is not the best. So a scratch comes with a bit of pain. That way next time I'll be more careful around thorns. I didn't yet know how to handle my big mistake. But now I knew that God created me with the capacity to make mistakes. Instead of only feeling frozen, there was a part of me that was almost curious. I still didn't know how to be me who made a big mistake, but now I knew that God had a plan. I was still facing my mistake. It mattered, and so I didn't look away. And then God came. He stood with me, gazing at my mistake. And he too honored the effect it had on others. It was a place of raw truth, and his presence made a difference. I still didn't know how to fix what I had done wrong. I didn't think I could fix it. But he was there and he was standing with me. I stayed in that uncertainty in that moment for 2 weeks. I appreciated his company. And then what happened next was and still is an experience that made time stretch and linger. The calendar says that since then another 2 weeks and more have passed, but inside of me, the span between then and now feels like a single moment. I'm still caught inside of it right here, right now. And that's why I'm going to tell the rest of the story in the present tense. I'm still feeling unsettled, unable to move on from my mistake. But life continues. Today I'm low on groceries, so I go shopping. I'm driving down the road, the one with cracks in its surface. I'm driving carefully, watching where I'm going. And then suddenly, I see that one of the cracks in the road isn't a crack. It's a snake. For a split second, I take in its long, skinny beauty. And then I realize I can't stop in time. And the next instant, it's too late. The snake is dead. I apologized to God. This was his snake, a beautiful wild one. I like snakes, and my heart's breaking, but my feelings don't change what just happened. Slowly the realization sinks in. There is absolutely no way I can fix this one. I could explain it away. I wasn't reckless. It was an accident. The snake was lying still and gray on a gray road. All of that is true. But to me, they feel like excuses. And I see that they certainly don't bring the snake back. And with that, something deep inside of me breaks. Once again, I have a new identity. This time, I'm me who made a mistake that can't be fixed. Is there a way to fix this mistake? After the first mistake, I wondered, could I ask God to help me balance things? Could I pray, God, please give the ones hurt by my mistake something extra nice in their life to balance the wrong that I did? It didn't feel right somehow, but the thought lingered. But now with the snake, that would definitely not work. Nothing good is going to happen to the snake. It's gone. I almost start sobbing. That beautiful snake. But I restrain the expression of my emotions, though my heart breaks. This is not about me or about my grief. It's about the snake. The cost of my mistake was paid for by the snake. I stand there stubbornly. I refuse to build on someone's pain. I will not profit by learning at someone else's expense. I'm not going to move on as if it had no importance. Instead, I stand there stubbornly facing what I did, broken-hearted, without defense or disguise. I face the fact that the mistake was mine, at least in part, and it's not fair, but it's what happened. The entire cost of this mistake landed on the snake, who paid with its life. The cost is starkly real, and it isn't mine to dismiss or erase. All I can do is stand there and honor it. God stands with me, also honoring the cost paid by the snake. I don't want to stop facing the truth of what happened, but eventually, while continuing to honor the snake, I search for a different way, something that would allow me to move on from this mistake. Guilt forever? I can't hold guilt forever. And if I choose this approach, when I let go of the guilt, It'll lessen my ties to my inner sense of right and wrong. It will distance me from God, and that can't be God's plan. As for sweep it under the rug, no, not when it's someone else's pain. My mind drifts. God has shown me a lot about my childhood in the last 2 or 3 years. My dad wanted spiritual worth, and he figured he had more of it than anyone else except God. That put him at the top. Because I was lower than him, I had little worth to him, and that made me sad. So I turned to Mom. Mom wanted to be seen as wise, as the one who knew best, and that too put her at the top, and me below, having less worth. I kept trying to please her, hoping that one day she'd see my worth, but that never happened, no matter how hard I tried. I come back to the present and refocus. It's not about my past. It's about the snake. Again, I stand relentlessly in the pain, with God by my side. I must find another idea, another way to handle mistakes. I know some say that we all have worth to God no matter what we do. Intrinsic worth, equal worth for everyone. Those sound like pretty words, but that approach doesn't feel right to me. If the mistake I made doesn't change anything, then the snake's life had no worth, and that I refuse to believe. I try to imagine a path somewhere between the extremes. Above, I have no worth no matter what I do, and below, I have full worth no matter what I do. The more I try to imagine it, the more I see it won't work. How can I honor the snake's death if my only question is, how can I keep or regain my worth after making this mistake? And suddenly I see. It's not a path forward that's missing. It's the environment that's wrong. I don't need a new approach within the system of my childhood. I need a new framework, a different environment. Worth is not the right framework because it's not about worth. I don't need to know how much worth I have. I don't need to figure out whether a mistake changes my worth. Worth is the wrong lens. It's that simple. It's not about having worth, losing worth, or regaining worth. It's simply not about worth. Worth is not the right way to look at mistakes. I face the reality of the snake's death and of God standing with me, honoring that death. I refuse to stop honoring it because that snake mattered. And then around me, the very background of my life begins to fall apart. Not just how I see events or rules or even feelings, but the entire framework. The one I've lived with my whole life, 60 years and more. The worth framework. It breaks into pieces and fades. And what's left is the world of my dream. The place where I can't even recognize what's an object and what's background. Where I can't tell if I'm looking at a path or empty space or the middle of an object. I was only looking for a new way to handle mistakes. Now, though, I have a whole new framework. One that's so unfamiliar I can't even name what I'm seeing. Of course I can't find the rules here. I don't even know how to look. I don't even know if there's a path to God or with God. I'm completely disoriented. I don't see God, or maybe I do and don't recognize Him. I don't know. But my heart senses His presence. I don't even know if He's out there or in my heart or both. But I can feel His presence. That means I can focus on Him. I'd like a path and I ask for one, but everything's surreal. I can see, but I can't interpret what I see. The only thing I have in this entire new world that I can recognize is His presence. It's unsettling. This space where I don't know anything, not even how to look, not even how to see a path. But here I can honor the snake and I can focus on God. Then I notice something. I can feel it. I'm closer to my inner sense of right and wrong. I'm closer to God's voice in my heart. How strange. How unexpected. Because of that closeness, I feel a rising joy. I don't understand it. I can't make sense of a joy that doesn't diminish the respect I have for the snake's death. For a joy that doesn't lessen my grief. The grief remains quite real, but the joy is equally real. This is the end of part A. Everything I've shared with you here is real. It's not a metaphor or parable. It's a true story from my life, and it's still unfolding. I don't have yet the words for part B, but I know they'll come. Thank you for joining me on the first part of this adventure.